Okay, I think we should start with some introductions before we show the film. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this webinar today. My name is Sahr Muhammedally. I'm the director for our Middle East program at the Center for Civilians in Conflict. And with me are my co-panelists, Harri Grace, who is a senior producer and executive producer and director of two-time Oscar, Emmy, and Peabody-winning Grain Media. And he helped produce the documentary that we're going to be seeing this morning and this afternoon. Some of you are joining from different time zones. And then we also have Portia Stratton, who is the Iraq country director for Mine Action Group. And she's been with MAG in Iraq for 3 years and has worked with Hana, who is the main person in the film that we're going to be showing you. And after the film, we're going to have a panel discussion with all three of us and open it up for questions. So with that, we will turn it over to getting the film. And just very briefly, actually, before I start, Sinjar is a majority Yazidi district in northwestern Iraq, and it borders with Syria and Turkey. It was seized by the Islamic State in August 2014, and was a scene of immense tragedy with a genocidal campaign of killings, rape, abductions, and enslavement, and the surviving community's exodus to safer ground camps in the adjacent Kurdish region. Over 200,000 people fled Sinjar in 2014, and incremental efforts to drive ISIS out of Sinjar started in November 2015. While ISIS has been removed from Sinjar, there are huge challenges in terms of recovery, both political, security, and economic. And this film showcases some of the resiliency of Sinjaris, especially the Yazidi community, as they reclaim their ancestral home. So with that, we can start the film.
عبول دراهم وزرعة كتك أسبوع ناتشة هكا حادثة بسبب بابان متفجرات شينار خلقي ما رداني وما ترسيك مباص نصر خلقي ما هي ناویم هنه بس گرک فخورم بس خود بینم یزیدی متفيدين حديقة كم نستهيهر حياة عادي بو أزو زار الخو عالي خو بيقرد عيش بيبي
عندي أخوة حلو.
بدوامتها نتشنا تاموسي
كم عقايدة دفعنا بيبي؟
تبرشي بوبو دب أسناش مشغول بس بعد وش شغل أزس بالبعض معطلة سبوا مو بندرك
لأنك هو تيبر دستت خوب بشو
أبشار سالن داعش ترى لك الجلك مزن في مجتمعها مو كيكر بصورة عامة نزا أز برأي أخوة يعني سببك نبو داعش وسال مبقى بس سبب الرئيسي يزيدين بس درر هرا مسر الكتشكا يزيدي الجنا يزيدي بو هكا تدو هي كم نخوش بو تيرو دي سدور كم بيجي هي برهم كسبية واغتصاب وليدان وتعداي يعني دس دريجاي اللي هات يكري واش كلك حاج شو تبيني هو ما خراب همو مع المدني ياون بلا هم جماعة تامين هم تاتين وشتيفان معاناتي كم همو كاديتين وأفدرنا مزنجي وكرينا وحاولان دينا يعني بشتي تشوينا وانجي هر أرض درر بمينه وأف لغمو عبول منطقين مدى ومالي المدى زرعان عبوا إش قلق تشتي تشيكرينا إش بروشكا تشيكرينا إش قوريات تشيكرينا وإش سكرابات تشيكرينا إش قلق تشتي عبوا تشيكرينا هي إيش أوفيسي دارت كيفن از تیم لیدر تیمکی کچکای إزالة الغامايمة داعش عبواء الأرض الخلكي الزراعي دا شاندن المالي دوان دا شاندن حتى كرنا داخلي العبك الزارود خطر أكيد أم خطرياوي جيزانه ويكوجي خطوة كا غلط أزل في شغلي ده بكم أف خطوة وي حياتان خلاص كا مزانينا من العبوة أكيد قري وكي أو عبوة لا سمح الله تهقي في ديك وان درع وخودة وانين نجوى هنا مع وقتي أم محتاجة تفكيك قرنية مديك هنا
ولا أنا
مديك ما سحبة عبواها
يباشا خذي برا
دي ماينر همو شغل بالساكنين النقطة الخضرون ما سحبة عبواها
باشا دفع القريش
شغله يرو ماكري قالك قنجبه وعبا حد عندن في شجته هنا جارية كده بغنو قالك اشتينا خبسين يعني كيرا خبتني أو بغنو باشا جماعة هي بس هيفا دي بس أخوانا قالك إننا خبسين جوايهن مطعمين فريقين مني سشغل أو عائلتين مني ددوية هون يرونا تعبي؟ يا قالك بروجة شوتي نفس عائلتين أو شكل مهم البا
سرده سرده بجد شد بيجي
أف رقم تلفون مينا هكا وتشتاق بهست
صار نوزي سؤالك ايش واقم كيكش وقت تشتاق دي تلعب كل قاعدة كيش فعنا ويبي كيرتيه القريش ورا بيني شرا ادخل چی دی تشتی وساشی هکا مدید ام خونیزینگ ناکن یکیش ما یک نابجه چی خورده امی بازانه از بازم زی چمجم داکی و هتشتاق مدید از چیه بیجه بابیم یا برایم یکیش ات گوند بلا چلی بنیر
سبهي وبنا
عبو الفيدري هينا الفيدري جارنا زارو كون هكا امري خدي كرن
يعني إنها شكت كي عبو الفردا ماين
هينا هيش ماين
زاروی و نتیلن در کفن یا دلی وی پی بیش برفان عبوات
دلی ما امنا در کفن ابد
شبر متفجرات وانا شبر تشتوي
ذهبنا بس امن كار زار ما در کفن بس مدى فجري وكري خوش كان مدى فجري كشت عمري 15 سال
15 سال
حوالي خورا شو بربي وبرازيل مي بيرو او بلندار او قلق تعرف بيو تعرف
عائلتي
ابي خدي تقريبا نقش وعملي در تاخن نيو قبل
شهادة تالي أنا خوش شابه وين معي بستريني
زارو بيصير بمعرضتري خطورة عبوة والغامعين
أو في خطرية ما ظن زان هكا أم موجودة في المنطقة بس بشغل كبس هنا فرهشي شقي خوشي بالشغل هاش وردة راستي دهر تماما شو هالشقوق هي دي بالشغل إحساسا ما يعني أم بين ظلمة كما ظن المهامي هاتي كرن خلكش مياري همي برينا كما ظن المهاتي كرن بتشتهش قابا بيرا مهات وديما البيرا مدى
حتى نها أمد قعرنا وأمد كربينا جبرويتش جنا يزيدي قالك الشجاعة وقوية ولازم بدو ثابت.
باش انجمعت شغلها تمام. بس بدنا ترسم. لا أبد.
أم أبد ناسكن.
داعش بس بيا وخوا داعش رأيكي بجنانينا بس كلعبة هكا كسبية كشفر استخدام هكا وبس. لو رأيكي بدينينا تمام.
شهر يعني جمالتين سودين مقارنة وجمالة صفر تأخيري.
أبي شغلي أم قلقي أم رسالة داعش الشينين هكا
حاولت تشتي شوي أم جبيرة بك. هجي أردي مشعوبة فعقشكر شعورك بقواتر الدم. ملبي برينينها صافي.
Okay, wow, that was very powerful and inspiring. I like the line, each mine helps us, detonating each mine helps us stronger. So Harri, since you are the producers, would love to hear your thoughts on how the making of the documentary, how the subject was chosen, what were some of the challenges. And then for participants, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function to submit them. And then once all the panelists have offered some remarks, we'll turn to some questions. So over to you.
Great. Okay, hopefully you can hear me now. So the film was part of a series that we made in collaboration with the Nobel Peace Prize. And the aim of each film was to celebrate the legacy of a previous winner of the Peace Prize. So in this case, it was the International Campaign to Ban Landmines, which won the Peace Prize in 1997. So that was the sort of the genesis of the project, and that's how we came across Mag, and then ultimately how we came across Hannah. And I think our approach to the film is the same as it is with most of our films at Grain Media, which is the production company where I work and the production company that made this film. And it's, I suppose what we try and do is look at some of the more challenging places on Earth, some of the more challenging situations, but to look at those situations through the eyes of amazing, extraordinary people. And our feeling is that there are plenty of stories of death and destruction, and that we wanted to tell a story about hope and empowerment, so that people rebuilding their communities. And our experience is that those are the films that sort of, I suppose, punch through a little bit, that we sort of feel that, I don't know, people can become numb to news of violence and despair, and we want to make films that people want to watch and want to share and want to talk about, and especially people who don't necessarily have an interest in Iraq or in the Yazidi community. So I think that's how we sort of approach filmmaking. And the aim of this film, I suppose, was twofold. I think one was to show that landmines are still an issue. And I think it's extraordinary how many people I spoke to during the filming or afterwards, who didn't realize quite what an issue this still is, sort of felt that it was something of the past. So I think that was one thing. I'm sure Portia can speak to that. And then I think the second aim of the film was to keep the world's attention on this region, and I think also to sort of change the narrative about this region a little bit. I think the sort of narrative has been ISIS and all the atrocities. Inevitably, you know, that is the sort of the what people think about when they think of Iraq more recently. And we wanted to, in some ways, I suppose, try and help reset that and show the amazing people like Hannah, who are there and rebuilding their communities. And just sort of share one story that happened to me a few weeks after I came back from Iraq. I was on a train from Wales to London, and I was editing my photos from Iraq, and an Arabic guy sat down next to me, and I could sort of see that he was looking at my photos, and as he got off the train, he just left me a note, and on it, you know, and then he sort of got off quite quickly, and on it, it just said, "Thank you for showing what is happening in my country." And it just sort of, I don't say that to sort of celebrate the film or celebrate what we did, but I suppose just to sort of show the importance of telling these sort of stories, of trying to get stories such as Hannah's out there. So I think those are the sort of the two aims of the main aims of the film. And then I suppose the final thing was the making of the film, and the small team of us that went over. There were 4 of us that came over from the UK to make the film, and we've all been to various war zones, and I suppose we filmed in some challenging circumstances, and this was by far the most scared I've ever been on a shoot. And being in a minefield in 45-degree heat, and there's a guy there with a gun to protect us because there are ISIS cells possibly nearby, were terrifying. And the only thing that sort of kept me going, kept us all going, was looking at Hannah and her team and the team at MAG, and just sort of thinking, this is what they do every single day. And they continue to do it, and I'm sure Hannah was probably out there today clearing mines. And so it was a real honor to tell the story of Hannah and then the wider story of MAG, who are just an incredible organization. So we feel very privileged to have been there and sort of worked with them all.
No, thanks so much. I mean, you've captured it so beautifully. Just the emotion, the challenges. It's very beautifully done. So I'll turn to Portia, and if you could offer some thoughts, and you work with Hannah very closely, and some of the work and the challenges that MAG is seeing in Iraq. I know it is one of the most heavily mined countries, the legacy unexploded ordnance from Iran, Iraq campaign and the US invasion. And so over to you.
Yeah, listening to Harri talk actually makes me feel very emotional, because even the whole process of getting the team there and the film made was quite an ordeal. But it was something that we were all, between us and Grain Media, determined to do, because we wanted to tell that story. And as Harri rightly said, we wanted to tell the story not only of what was happening in Sinjar and to that Yazidi community, but also the story of landmines in general and how they were still affecting populations across the world, and use that as an opportunity to be able to do that in a very powerful way. And I do remember when Harri and Orlando and the crew, like he says, it was a 4-man crew, and they were only there for 10 days, and to do what they did in 10 days was incredible. And we said, nobody understands the landmine issue anymore. They think it's something that died away with the Mine Ban Treaty 20 years ago and Princess Diana. Nobody really recognizes that it's a thing anymore, and we struggle with that in the context in which we work on, in the broader, in the broader context of not just Iraq, but any other country within protection clusters, whatever. Everybody thinks that mines can be dealt with very quickly, very easy, and they can't. It takes us a long time. So having a film like this to showcase, that it is, we train people, national staff, local staff from those communities, whether they are from Sinjar, Talafa, wherever, to be able to do the job. But it's still people on the ground doing that, removing it mine by mine by mine. Yes, we have some machines. Yes, we have some mine detection jobs, but mostly it's humans, it's people still doing this job. And I think, for us, having the film crew come out there and being so thoughtful about the way that they depicted this, there's so many uses for it, to be able to use also within our own humanitarian aid community, within the international community with donors, to be able for them to see what it is we actually do and how demanding the job actually is, and that, as Harri mentioned first of all, it's not gone away, and yes, with the Mine Ban Treaty, we made huge progress 20 years ago, and yes, with the likes of ISIS, there is a resurgence in use of mines, and they might be more improvised nature. They previously were of a conventional nature. But they are still being used as weapons of warfare, and still have the same tolls on community that they used to have. And being able to demonstrate that Hannah is one of 200 odd Yazidis that we have working in Sinjar doing this kind of work, and one of almost 1,000 members of staff that we have as an organization in Iraq, all of whom are recruited from the areas in which they they work. So yeah, it was sort of, I think, for us, a really, like, so privileged to work with Harri and Orlando and the team, but a really amazing tool to be able to use to say what Mine Action is and what Mine Action does, and to be able to showcase people like why it sort of takes the effort that it takes, and how we also work with other members. Like, the community is really important. You couldn't do this work without embedding yourself and liaising with the community that's affected, but equally the other organizations, development, humanitarian and stuff like that, that are also working in the same fields that we work. And if we don't coordinate on these things, you know, we you know, also makes all of our jobs more difficult as well.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. And I think you raised the point both on this larger aspect about landmines continue to be a threat to civilians. Yes, you have the landmine treaty, but you know, there's still a lot to do in terms of implementation and supporting communities and removing legacy mines. And I mean, in Iraq, it's interesting because you have, I mean, the ISIS factor, and you know, they, you know, had a scorched earth approach where they booby-trapped buildings, and as they retreated, they booby-trapped buildings and roads. And you know, I've traveled all over Iraq since 2015 myself, so I've seen firsthand the challenges. And I think, you know, I think what this film really shows is, you know, just like that it is, you need to have recovery in order to move forward also, right? You can't, yes, I think, Harri, as you said, you know, the focus on ISIS and the horrors that they have done, but then in order for a community to recover after the fact, you know, you have to have clearance, you have to have of landmines, of unexploded ordnance, so people can return home. I mean, so I you know, it's, you know, CIVIC's work in Iraq is very much about, you know, we are trying to influence the behavior of security actors to respect rights and obligations and protecting civilians, but also we are trying to work with communities so they become advocates on protection issues with local actors. But in Sinjar, it's very complicated because, you know, it is a disputed status within Iraq. So you have federal Iraq, and then you have the Kurdish authorities laying claim to Sinjar. You have, it's on the border of Syria and Turkey, and you have Turkish airstrikes continue in Sinjar mountain. So more UXOs, more work for organizations like MAG, and, you know, making it very difficult for all the displaced Sinjaris to return. You have the airstrikes, you have just widespread contamination. I mean, the film just graphically shows just the destruction, right? I mean, you know, I've spent a lot of time, you know, last few years, you know, in Mosul and as areas were being cleared. And it is devastating to see the destruction of essential services, schools, hospitals, building. And, you know, recovery is so incredibly slow. And I mean, in Sinjar, it's just complicated by the fact that, you know, this is the ancestral land of the Yazidis. They've been historically persecuted in Iraq, and then with what happened with ISIS. And now, in order for them to go back to their ancestral lands, you need safe roads, you need buildings to return to, you need you know, functioning schools, you need actually a functioning local government, which in Sinjar there isn't one, right? I mean, there's this, yes, the Kurdish authorities were controlling Sinjar from 2003 to 2014, and they abandoned their posts as ISIS came, and there's a lot of tension between Peshmerga and Yazidis because of that. But then you have these, and then when the ISIS was cleared, the Kurdish authorities came back, but then they left in 2017 because of the Kurdish referendum. And now then you have federal Iraqi forces there, but you have, in fact, I mean, I'm sure you saw, you have a multitude of security actors, right? You have the popular mobilization units, you have the Yazidi forces, the Sinjar defense forces, the Peshmerga affiliated forces, and it creates a very tricky landscape for civilians to navigate, right? Like, who is providing them protection under the law, right? How do you even thwart ISIS attacks, in a very vulnerable area? So we have found in our work that you can't even, the local police authorities have no ability to investigate crimes or to even hold their own security forces accountable. That is also a challenge in an area that's trying to recover. And this is all compounded by the lack of services, the UXO landmine challenges. Again, the film really showed just the destruction of private property and infrastructure. And I know, your work, is just so it's enormous. It would be useful to see, Portia, how do you envision, like, how long, what are the statistics in terms of how much contamination there is in Sinjar district?
Gosh, we don't know because we haven't done a comprehensive survey of north and south of the mountain. We have cleared most of the contamination north of the mountain because unfortunately MAG right now is one of the only mine action organizations that actually works in Sinjar. There are a number of mine action organizations that work across Iraq, but we are the only ones that work in Sinjar. The UN has had a couple of teams there, but I don't think they're there right now. And they've been predominantly south of the mountain as well. So we've been there since we started doing our recce's in late 2015 and have been doing clearance there since 2016. So 4 and a bit years now. We've done all known clearance north of the mountain. And are now very much focused of south of the mountain. We have a lot of teams working in Rambusi, which is kind of just to the west. I have to do that. Dyslexia, blame it on that. Just the west of kind of like the checkpoint as you come out of Sinjar city. We have also done quite a few tasks within Sinjar city itself. And we have cleared some villages south of the mountain as well. We have had complexities to our operations as a result of the COVID situation. We haven't been able to work for the last few months, unfortunately, because of COVID itself has not actually really affected Sinjar, but there has been other restrictions that the government has placed on movement between districts and governorates and stuff like that have meant that we haven't been able to operate. We are within Sinjar now, we are just getting the teams back up and running. So we're hoping within the next 2 weeks, we should be able to redeploy them again, which will be fantastic because we know that there are returns happening from the camps in KRI and stuff, and particularly to some of these villages where we have been working and have had to cease, like Rambusi, and we know there is huge need in the villages themselves to do with people's housing, the contamination that's in people's homes, but also the land around that. So that's really our main focus now, is paying attention to the return situation in those areas and trying to put all of our teams and their focus of attention on those areas as well.
Oh, great. Harri, when you were talking about, and we'll turn to questions there, we've got lots of questions, but Harri, when you're talking about, navigating a very heavily mined field and just the risks, and, I remember when I was in Kobani, Syria in 2015, this was soon after ISIS was pushed out. We could only walk on one road and everywhere else was, a red zone. And it is very challenging. And, so all of these now civilians who, Iraqis who want to return back to their homes. I saw that the International Organization for Migration this month released data that 8,000 individuals are returning in July. and which was shocking given that the essential services are not fully on board. It's still a very dangerous area. But I guess there are also challenges in the IDP camps because of COVID-19. So it's interesting. So I'll turn to some questions. We've got some really interesting ones. Here, how did you recruit the women to work in the mine clearing, and what is their standing within their own community? Portia?
So, I mean, in Sinjar, really was never a problem to recruit women. The Yazidi community is very equal in the way that it operates. So we didn't really have to make any active drive to recruit women. They came to us, which is great. And I mean, I think when people look at Iraq as a whole, their perception is very different to that. But no, I mean, we've been very fortunate. I mean, working in Sinjar, that's not the case with the Yazidi culture. I mean, I think what we made an effort to do once we recruited females is definitely make sure that that they had equal opportunities within the organization. And you know, that's Hannah is a team leader, so she's not a deminer, she's not a female member of the team, she's the leader of the team. And she's not the only female team leader that we have 3 others, and we have 3 other deputy team leaders as well. So I mean, I think what we have been able to do since we knew that we were able to attract females in that environment, that make sure that, yeah, absolutely equal access to becoming into a managerial position, and they've done that. And we have, yeah, like we said, proportionally as many females as males within the structure that we have in Sinjar. We also have female mechanical team members, so the women that drive the big machines. So we have a lot of machines in Iraq. The machines that you see on a farmyard, like in the US or the UK, like a combine harvester type thing or whatever, you know, they drive big machines. So we have female machine operators too, which is pretty cool. And then I think the only thing to add is that, like, you know, MAG we've been working in Iraq for sort of like 27 years. And historically had not necessarily had the best track record of recruiting females in demining positions until we sort of worked in Sinjar, not for lack of trying, but just had, you know, it's culturally kind of quite difficult. But since we recruited the female deminers and then promoted them to team leaders and stuff in Sinjar, we have actually recruited a team of Arab female deminers in Talafa, which is the neighboring governorate to Sinjar, but very different culturally. And so much more conservative, if you like, culturally. And now we do have 5 female deminers there as well. That was a new thing for us. And then taking things that we'd learned from Sinjar, even though they are culturally very, very different, we sort of learned some lessons and thought, well, we can do this in other places. And we actively tried to recruit female deminers in that environment and have been successful. And they've been with us for about 2.5 years now. So that's another positive that we learned from that context as well.
No, and it's great, you know, giving, jobs and empowering women, especially given ISIS's legacy and the horrors that they perpetuated against women and girls in Iraq. So Harri, there's a question here that I thought would be useful for you. The comment is, thank you for showing such an inspiring and well-produced video. ISIS operations depend so heavily on media and its ability to perpetuate fear. What role can documentaries like this play in countering this approach?
It's a great question. I mean, I think as I talked at the beginning, you know, something that we definitely try and do is try and make films that are full of hope, because I think there is a sort of a tendency towards the sensational, and I think that's what sort of organizations like ISIS rely on. But I think you know, news can also do that as well, and just go for the sort of the, you know, the most horrific and the most despairing. And so, you know, as I say, our sort of approach is to try and combat that through showing the other side. And I think what you have to be careful of then is, you know, this is where hopefully our sort of skill as documentary filmmakers is to make the sort of the more hopeful films just as watchable and just as engaging and just as sort of exciting, for want of a better word. And so I think that's what we've tried to do with this film. And as I say, we've tried to do that with a lot of our films, addressing all sorts of issues around the world, is try and make films that have, you know, hope at their center, but that are also hopefully well made and shareable and watchable and stuff that people want to watch.
Thank you. So there are a couple of questions about children. Are children able to go to school? How effective is the training for children on the dangers of mines? And there can be more be done to help educate children. So there are a couple of related questions on kids, yeah.
So, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the Yazidi community are still in IDP camps. I mean, as we sort of referred to earlier, there are more returns happening at the moment, not all necessarily voluntary. I think, I mean, we try to do training within the camps where they are residing before they return, as well as then when they are returning. So we try to have our what we call community liaison teams link up with people that you know, even a lot of our staff who are Yazidi, and they have their families still residing in the IDP camps in KRI, for example. So we try to kind of like link up with information in informal and informal ways. And a lot of people, particularly the men, will go and do look and see visits to their villages, and try and find out about what's going on, maybe get information about the clearance. But it's also, I mean, I think, Sahr, as you sort of indicated earlier, it's not just, the mine clearance is one thing. The other thing is, you know, is there infrastructure? Are there schools? Are there homes? Are there medical facilities? Are there power lines? And we have a part to play in that as a mine action organisation. So we do prioritise our work looking at clearance of mines around power lines, because we know that ISIS mined them, clearance of people's homes, clearance of schools, clearance of medical facilities. So we do have a prioritisation process where we look at what we are prioritising. But we also know that we're not the only part in that. I mean, people are also not going to return home if the security situation is not conducive for them to do so. And as you mentioned earlier, the security situation in Sinjar is very volatile and dynamic, politically and security-wise. There is not a stable government, governors, whatever. There's disputed, you know, it's part of a disputed area. But then security-wise, there are so many different security actors operating across the board. I mean, even to get from our base to a task site, depending on one of 3 routes that our teams go to, right now, they have to go through, you know, between 9 and 13 checkpoints, all of whom are managed by different security actors. So there's a host of issues that we have to deal with. To be able for the population to return safely there.
You know, I mean, we as CIVIC is actually in the midst of just finalizing our report on Sinjar, which looks at a lot of these dynamics, the barriers to return, the lack of critical infrastructure, essential services, you know, which, you know, impacts right to access to healthcare, education. I mean, one of the concerns we are observing is if you don't have school services up and running properly, then young kids are going to get recruited to join these militias. And, you know, and there are concerns about that. And again, it's just this, you know, there's been a lot of international attention about what happened in Sinjar to the Yazidi community, and of course you have the UN has started its investigations on war crimes, etc. But what is being done now to help recovery happen? And it needs leadership, it needs accountability. You know, you have to get all of the different security, military forces under the same chain of command. You need to get the mayors back into town to actually do their work of governing, which I'm sure, I mean, again, this is the research we've done too, which we know that the approval process for demining takes forever. I mean, it's quite complicated. You know, just because the major battle has ended doesn't mean things are normal for civilians, and their concerns continue to be, you know, the list is pretty long. So there's a question about, you know, actually, Harry, someone was asking, why aren't you focusing more on how terrible and the crimes and the horror of ISIS against women and girls? I think that's the question. I'm just going back to it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, again, it was to sort of go back to the point I made earlier. I suppose it's trying to sort of reset that narrative a little bit, and that's not to in any way sort of downplay that, but our feeling was that that is the dominant narrative, and if you sort of read about that region, that is a lot of what you hear, and that is a lot of what you read. And so we didn't want that to sort of, we obviously needed to touch on that, which is what we did in the film. And there's two sort of sequences where we show some of those atrocities and show, you know, Hannah's thoughts about it. But what we didn't want to do was for that to become the sort of the dominant part of the film. And again, that was in order that we allowed, you know, Hannah's story to dominate. And that is a story of rebuilding, and it's a story of family and of community and of courage and of, you know, work. And we wanted that to be the sort of the dominant narrative. So it was a tough balance to get in the edit, was how much of the sort of the ISIS and the atrocities did we want to put in the film, and obviously we had to put enough of that in, versus how much, because it's very easy for that stuff to overshadow everything else. So that was a sort of a constant a sort of discussion battle in the edit, was exactly that, that sort of, you know, Hannah's story versus the ISIS story.
No, thank you. And have you actually shown it to the authority, or have the Iraqi authorities seen it? And, you know, what's their reaction been, both on the Kurdish and the federal government?
Yeah, no, they're really supportive of it. They both were. We did do a premiere of it in Oslo. Actually, before it was released by Netflix. I mean, Grain Media, Harry and Orlando very kindly let us do a screening of it in Oslo in late November, early December. Orlando actually came out for it. It was an opportunity because we did have the mine action authorities for both federal Iraq and Kurdistan there, and they saw it there. But we'd obviously told them about it before they were aware that it had been filmed. No, and they were actually very, very supportive of it. I mean, I think, yeah, touching on what Harry says, I mean, yes, there's so many complexities around Sinjar, and Iraq as a country itself is an incredibly complicated country. But I think for us, you know, this film and showing this, you know, on the positive things like post-ISIS was really, really important, and the positivities of what we can overcome mine action and deal with as well. And I think the authorities that when they've seen the films and we've, you know, discussed it with them, really see that as well, and do want to, you know, they do, you know, from a mine action perspective, and when I'm talking about the authorities, I'm talking more about the mine action authorities that we deal with. one of whom within Kurdistan is sort of at ministerial level, and the one within federal Iraq is within the Department of Environment and Health, do actually see it, I think, as a sort of tool to help show what the positive things post ISIS as well, and want to see it in that way. So we sort of want to, and we've discussed this with Harri on Orlando and Grey Media about how we can use this as a sort of tool for good for Iraq from a sort of advocacy perspective, but what we'd also expect, you'd expect from the Iraqi government if you were going to be able to do so as well.
Yeah, no, well said. Now I have a question from actually a very old friend of mine I can see. He was a professor of IHL at one of the local law schools in New York, who's asking about the supply side. What efforts are underway to influence law and policy of states on the manufacture and sale of anti-personnel mines and further implementation of the Landmines Treaty? So this is a bigger, much broader strategic level question. Over to you, Portia.
Okay, so I mean, I think as MAG, we are a member of the International Campaign to Ban Landmines. I myself worked with the International Campaign to Ban Landmines for 6 years before I joined MAG, so I know them quite well. I think we do definitely, we are, we provide information and discuss with our other colleagues, particularly the likes of Human Rights Watch and stuff on these kinds of issues. It's not something as an organization that we necessarily take the lead on, but our policy people within the organization, as a country program, we pass information on to them. We liaise very much with our policy team within the UK, and globally. For example, kind of the work that we have done on IEDs and what constitutes an IED and what falls under the definition of an anti-personnel mine. A lot of that work was taken from seeing things on the ground in the likes of Iraq and maybe even Syria and stuff, and looking at what the definition of a landmine is under the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention, and and driving that discussion through that kind of forum. So but through that kind of unit within our organization in the HQ, and the discussions that they have with, like I say, our colleagues within Human Rights Watch, Merriweather and Bonnie Doherty, like all of those people who are well known in the sort of like weapons discussion. We hope that stuff kind of like comes through that channel.
Great. And there are a couple of questions that maybe I can just offer some thoughts just based on CIVIC's work. So what are the main challenges Yazidis and others returning to Sinjar? What are the major spoilers, such as lack of government services, militia control? I kind of touched on that. There are huge challenges because you have various myriad armed actors with very competing allegiances and their own strategic goals. It's also, Sinjar is located on a smuggling route as well. So, and there's just not proper command and control from the various operations command, and that just leads to uncertainty and lack of security for civilians, which is a deterrence for returns. At the same time, yes, the lack of essential services is also deterring Yazidis from returning. There are also tensions between Yazidis and some Sunni Arab communities because of some Arabs joined ISIS in the persecution of Yazidis when the ISIS took over, and I think there's a lot of resentment, and there's a view amongst the Yazidis that they don't want some of the Sunni Arabs to return to Sinjar. So there's tension on those issues and how there are hindrances for returns for all of the people who belong to that area. And then the other challenge is the other question is how are community members sort of taking part in their own protection? And I think, the CIVIC has created, just only in this last couple of months, one of our pillars of CIVIC's work is to empower communities to advocate on their protection concerns. So we have created this civilian protection group that is reflective of the ethnic and demographic religious composition of Sinjar, to start, advocating on their concerns. While a lot of us are doing a lot of the advocacy through research, writing reports, meeting with interlocutors, and of course this documentary, but what can communities themselves do to have a dialogue with the local security actors about their concerns? So this is going to be, we have a report coming out in the next couple of months, and then this new group that we've created, we're going to be working with them, and they're going to be leading some of their advocacy concerns and asks with local communities. And then there's another comment, Harry, to you. Harry, great documentary. Portia, what an amazing work you're doing with MAG. Thank you both. I love the way you chose to focus on hope in the midst of pain and suffering. Harry, what is your next film?
Well, we have a couple out that I can't say too much about, actually, but they're still stories of hope. One is about the Portugal wildfires of 2017 that killed a lot of people, and we are looking at that as a sort of, through that lens, we are looking at climate change, and so following some extraordinary organizations that are doing amazing work, and that'll be out early next year. But we also have, as I mentioned at the start, this film was made in collaboration with the Nobel Peace Prize, and there are 4 other films in the series that look at different topics around the world. And what is the best way of finding them? If you search for Nobel Peace Prize films, they'll come up on the Nobel Peace Prize website, and they look at issues such as the Rohingya in Myanmar and Bangladesh, climate change in Mozambique, race relations in South Africa, and finally, I can't remember the
Mozambique one.
The Mozambique one. Have I said Mozambique?
No, you said climate change, maybe.
Climate change in Mozambique.
Yeah.
Gosh, this is
Race relations in the US or worldwide?
No, it's South Africa. It's specifically about South Africa. But again, they all look at
South Sudan.
South Sudan. God, Portia, thank you very much. That was getting embarrassing. South Sudan, and that's a film.
ICRC.
Yeah, about the Red Cross and an amazing guy who lost his leg in the conflict and has a prosthetic limb, and now builds prosthetics for other people who've lost limbs in the conflict. So again, each of those films look at sort of hope through, hope in challenging circumstances. So those films are out there, and yeah, those are worth watching, I hope.
Okay, great. No, I'm looking forward to them. You know what I like is that your films are so poignant, but so short also. It's like it conveys a message just so well.
Again, that's a sort of, a deliberate thing that people, we want as many people as possible to watch these, and the longer the film gets, the fewer people will watch it. I mean, as a sort of very rough rule. So yeah, we try and make them short and punch in. Certainly with these films, that was the brief, was to try and keep them sort of a very watchable length for as large a number of people as possible.
No, great. So there are a couple of questions, Portia, that I'm going to direct to you. One is, as one gentleman said that, are you working with Christians and Shabaks to try to rebuild their infrastructure, lives, livelihoods? And, what else is MAG doing in the Nineveh Plains with some of these communities?
Yeah, so we target any vulnerable community. Not, we don't focus on particular minorities. We focus on vulnerability, full stop. And that's sort of, how we assess where we work. But we do work in Shabak communities, and we do work in Kakai communities, and we do work in Yazidi communities, but we also work in Arab communities as well. So we really focus our efforts on where the need is, where the mines are, and what the impact on that community is, and we make our assessment on that basis. But yes, we work in lots of minority communities in Iraq because they were really a lot of the ones that were persecuted.
So there's one question, again, I'm going to go to you, Portia, is what's your exit strategy for Iraq? Are you planning to let the local authorities take over demining and prevention and clearance in Sinjar or elsewhere in Iraq?
Yeah, so I guess we do have this question a lot. I mean, I think we recruit locally wherever we work. So our deminers are locally recruited. Yes, we do have international technical experts who go in and train them. And you know, those are the people that Harry and Orlando and like met, who were there doing the training on the ground when they were there. But it's the local teams that we recruit who are on the ground doing the job day to day. And that's, you know, and that's the way that MAG works globally, is that you get less and less of those internationals in country. Yes, we need them initially because the work is dangerous. So we need to recruit and train these people, and we need to train them properly because you can have accidents, and those accidents can be fatal. And if we don't do our due diligence in terms of training those people properly, then you will have more fatalities. So we have to do our job in making sure that we are passing over the skill set to that local population. And that does take time, unfortunately, and it takes longer time than a lot of people want it to ever take. But at the same time, if we don't take time, then we're not doing our job properly, and we're not doing our due diligence to make sure that we are training them safely and securely to be able to do their job. Now, in Iraq, yes, there is the army that does do some of this job, but, you know, they don't do it necessarily to humanitarian mine action standards. They do it to military standards that are different. The local authorities themselves in Iraq do not have a capacity to do the job. And in Iraq, the only capacity that they would designate nationally is the army. And as I've already said, they would do some clearance, but they wouldn't do it to humanitarian mine action standards, which is clearing a village fully, rather than, you know, what we call breaching, or, you know, clearing it to military standards. So, you know, there is a massive role for humanitarian or civilian demining in Iraq. And, you know, our hope is that by training the capacity that we have, eventually, and we are already doing it, step by step, we remove, you know, the internationals. And like I said, Hannah is a team leader. You know, we have national supervisors in Sinjar. We will gradually, you know, hopefully have no international people in Iraq overseeing this kind of role, and be able to have, you know, just local Iraqis. I mean, in Kurdistan, where we've worked for 22 years, we do not have international supervision. It's Kurdish, senior Kurdish deminers that are overseeing this, and the same will be the case in federal Iraqi areas in a few years' time as well. And like I say, all the time we are making the assessment of removing people, promoting people from locally recruited people into more senior positions. As soon as they get the qualifications, you promote them into that position and you remove the international, and that's the way we work.
That's great. I mean, one of the things that we have seen in our research in Sinjar is that you have the Iraqi authorities that are, you know, and some of the militaries involved in demining. But then you also, I mean, as you said, you know, some of them are not doing it to the humanitarian standard. What we've also seen is that some of the local forces who are not properly trained are also doing this. And it's a risk to them, and then it's a risk to anybody coming in because the homes are not properly cleared. And then I think you mentioned also, you know, some people are being pushed out, like, okay, now you need to go back. So there's this there's this dual sort of people being, people want to return sooner because it is their ancestral home and they don't want to live in IDP camps forever. And then there could be these push-pull factors about trying to get some local militia to clear it when they're not properly cleared. Yeah. And then also, that's a risk to civilians as they return.
Yeah, absolutely. It is.
Yeah.
It is. And I mean, and it's and to be honest, it's a struggle for us. Because sometimes we get told that we can't go and work in an area and clear it because other actors are clearing it. And we not confident in the work that they're doing as well. But for the local population, they might not differentiate between the work of MAG and the local security actor as well, because we're just as clearance organizations and stuff. So it's a struggle and something that we have to kind of constantly try and balance, and can get very complicated politically, especially in an area like Sinjar. And we have had some issues, some complexities, and again, that that's a lot for our staff on the ground to manage, and they are constantly having to manage that liaison role that they're doing, going and managing the clearance program on the ground. And I'm talking about our Yazidi staff with, as we mentioned, the huge number of various different actors, as well as, some of these complexities around people doing informal demining or, and all of these things. So it definitely adds to the complexity of their jobs, and they have to become sort of like diplomats at the same time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And one question is, I know there was a question about women, and it was much easier in Sinjar to recruit women because of culture. Yazidi, I mean, Yazidi culture actually is very conservative.
Yeah.
Right? But do you find sort of tensions in terms of employment issues or concerns between genders? It was like the man's not being employed, but the woman's being employed.
I think if you were having this conversation with Hannah here, because I know we've asked her this question several times, she'd say no. Ask Harry this question as well, of how he found working with Hannah and a number of like male counterparts around and stuff like that. I mean, they spent sort of kind of the best part of 10 days with her, and I think it'd be good to get a response from that. I mean, my perspective, we've got some very formidable Yazidi women who, and like I said, we've asked Hannah this question directly, various interviews, and answer is no. But I think it'd be interesting to get Harry's perspective from the filming as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I sort of echo what you say, Portia, that I'm certain that if Hannah was here, she would say, no, not at all. I obviously, it was Hannah that we spent time with, as well as some of the other women who were there. But certainly my experience was that there weren't sort of issues, that they were, the women wanted to be there and that they were fully supported to be there. But again, that was sort of, that's mainly from spending time with Hannah, who's, a pretty incredible and strong and determined woman. But so actually I was a bit sort of surprised to hear you say that, Yazidi culture is quite conservative, because my experience with it was actually that it was very sort of liberal in its attitudes, but that might have been my sort of experience with Hannah and her family. I mean, her husband's wicked. He only features briefly in the film, but also a great guy.
Yeah, I mean, Hannah's husband works for us as well, and sort of doing it in a sort of security guard role and stuff like that. So, like, I mean, Hannah's kind of in a way, if you like, the far more dominant doesn't sound right. What would it like, kind of senior position within the organization, if you like, and that's not an issue at all. And she's not the only woman that works for us in Sinjar who's like that as well. And we've got multiple numbers of couples and stuff like that that work for us. And yeah, it's not being an issue. I mean, I understand what you say about it being conservative, but I think it's we've not had those issues. I think because there is that kind of like, you know, there is that equality about education and stuff. It's never been an issue for us. Then they're all, like I said, female machine operators and everything, pretty formidable characters. You know, Hannah and a bunch of others as well. So yeah. Yeah,
one thing to say about Hannah that the sort of from a filmmaking perspective was very interesting is that when you sort of make a film, you know, the ideal is that you get sort of emotion from your main character, and something about Hannah is that she is strong, and you know, she says at the end, "I'm never afraid, never." And you know, when we sort of interviewed her and heard that, I was, oh god, that's going to be really tough, because what you're looking for is for, you know, the audience to be able to empathize with somebody and go, yes, that's how I'd feel. I would feel scared if I was there on the minefield, and I would feel terrified for my children and, you know, worried every day. And it's not Hannah, and I don't think she was being sort of particularly brave or, you know, showing off or anything. That is just how she is. But in the end, that became a real sort of asset for the film, because that became the sort of the emotion that we clung to. This extraordinary person who's been through the most sort of, you know, her and her community is just the most horrific sort of experience, and yet she says, I'm not letting it sort of, you know, buckle me. I'm not afraid. I just do, you know, I just keep doing my work. And so that sort of it was an interesting sort of experience from a filmmaking perspective to experience. To sort of shift a little bit because of this incredible person at the center of it.
You know, I've generally found that amongst Iraqi women, just generally, I've interviewed hundreds of them.
Strong.
You know, I mean, you know, as they were with their family crossing, you know, over dead bodies from Mosul, crossing to the Iraqi security forces line, and you would, you know, talk to them right there, and they would speak with this stoicism, determination. I have rescued my family, and I need to get them to safety. And yes, their husband could have been killed, or their daughter would, you know, had a blown up leg. It was pretty mind blowing. I mean, you know, and it's just like, wow, the strength and courage of these women. You know, some of them who lived through ISIS rule, right, and had to follow all their horrific rules, and then, you know, fleeing for safety, and how they moved their families with airstrikes, mortar shelling, artillery, IEDs blowing. It is really, it is pretty remarkable, and it's a very humbling, right? And it's also inspiring. So I mean, you spend 10 days with Hannah, and I mean, I would only get these snippets of conversations with the women that I was trying to, you know, speak to as they were crossing over to find out what happened to them, what were their protection concerns. And then I would just end of the day at night at midnight, like, wow, what an inspiring day. Heartbreaking also because of the devastating loss, but also just inspiring the courage under utmost atrocities and horror to seek a future, some safety for your family. So anyway, I don't think we have any more questions. Do you have any final thoughts before we close up?
No, nothing from me. Thanks for showing the film, and thanks everybody for coming and for all the kind words about the film. It means a lot for you know, different communities to take different things from the film, and for the sort of the NGO world, you know, for MAG and civilians to sort of appreciate the film means a lot, and will be really felt by all the people involved with the film. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just from my side, I mean, yeah, again, thank you for hosting this event. I mean, you know, to echo Harry's words, I mean, it's amazing to just get the film out there to more audiences. You know, the issue in itself, what's happening in Iraq, there's still so much work to do there. And I mean, yeah, to show this story, courageous women doing this kind of work. And like I say, I mean, I know if Hannah was here sitting in my seat instead of me, like she'd be saying the same things. People don't forget about us, is what she'd be saying. This work's going to be there for a long time to come, and we just need everybody's support, and we'll carry on doing it. So I think that's the message from my team in Sinjar to anybody that's sort of listening in is, don't forget about what they're doing. They'll continue working hard as long as they can until this situation, until we've gotten rid of all of the mines and people can return to Sinjar. And it is, I've been there many times, a beautiful place, and let's help them make it so again.
Right, no, thanks so much. I echo that. So the film can be found on the National Geographic website, as well as on the MAG website. We'll have it on our website too. And for those who are interested more in Sinjar, CIVIC is going to have a report on Sinjar and some of the issues that I was mentioning. It's going to be coming out in the next 6 weeks, couple of months. And then we are going to be doing more work with the community. So follow our website too, and social media to learn more about Sinjar and what can be done to support the recovery, support the stabilization, and allow people to have, a better chance to rebuild their lives. So thank you all so much for participating. Thank you to both of you and for all the questions. And I'm going to end it here. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.